Hello, hi.
First of all, thank you, Madina, for being here, for accepting this interview. First, if we think about the idea of this geo-corporeal politics of knowledge, how is the capitalist/colonial city at odds with what you call the most personal, affective, and embodied forms of inhabiting places?
I think that decolonial thought, the way it was first formulated, it wasn't really focusing on urban kind of environments or specifically on the cities, but in contrast with post-colonial studies, maybe where post-colonial city has been for a while the center of attention. So it's somehow new, and I think that in some ways it's more part of a larger decolonial framework that deals with designing precisely and with rethinking the pluriverse, and it comes through that kind of channel, so to say. But I think that it's a very important part of coloniality, decoloniality thinking, because urban design and urban kind of management, so to say, it's very much connected with modernity, coloniality as a set of frames of worlding, of seeing the world, of relating to the world. And in that sense, it actually looks right into the gist of how coloniality defines the self and disciplines the self in certain ways, and also not only the self but also the environment in a broad understanding, right? And also I think that if we can discuss colonial cities, we to some extent can also discuss ways of decolonizing the city spaces. And colonial spaces, decolonial spaces, and decolonial urbanities, I guess. Although I would be very kind of critical about the idea that we can decolonize the city. We cannot. We can. It's a process. We can do it for a while, but it's never coming to any concrete, finished results. So it's more about activism, urban activism, also epistemic activism and design activism, I guess, trying to create these spaces within the city that would be more decolonized, I guess, right, or with more decoloniality features than the usual modern colonial city.
We were discussing, you were presenting, and we were responding to it. These cities in the Caucasus, and how some certain ways of maybe not belonging, but inhabiting as such, are at odds with this type of cities. How would you describe this contradiction?
I think I agree that there is a contradiction, because you see that some of these framings and some of these designs are not human friendly, let's say, or not friendly to certain cultures and certain temperaments, I guess. But at the same time, I think human beings are amazing in the way they adjust and change things. Yeah, so we can say creolize things in a broader understanding of the term. So they always change environments to kind of fit what they need. And this is what happened in all of these imperial designs that we were discussing, but also I think it happens in Malmö. And that's why I like Malmö, for instance, because it's one of the places where you see this in action. And that's what gives city its vibrant quality and its human quality to me. I mean, in that sense, it's very different from many other places in Sweden. And this multicultural quality, which is very important also, I think, this diversity of cultures, and you can actually feel it here. And there is a certain contrast with the buildings, but I think it's not about the buildings, it's more about what people do with them.
How could we use this Khatib's double critique to understand diverse and so-called super diverse urban settings such as Malmö?
Oh, that's a good question, how you use double critique. Because, of course, when Khatibi originally used the term, you remember that he was speaking about this sort of global coloniality of knowledge, especially in reference to the global north that was orientalizing Morocco and generally the north of African cultures. And then the local frameworks and mechanisms and institutes of discrimination, the traditionalism, and the interplay of that. I would say that a lot of people now use it also in Europe, speaking about this, again, interplay of imperialism and internal nationalist movements sometimes, and how they clash, and how there is this kind of balance that needs to be kept. But in points of urbanity, it's hard to say, because I think the only way sometimes is, we're not going to go and destroy the imperial buildings, right? They are there. We can destroy maybe some monuments, as it happens all over the world. But in general, I think it's a way more of changing something in the way we perceive them, and maybe changing some details in these buildings and the way they're structured, and somehow by doing it we can question their kind of monopoly on knowledge production, or representing themselves as seriously as they do. I have an example from Kazakhstan. I collaborate with people there who are making a very interesting project, which is called Celinny. And Celinny is like a center for contemporary art that was created about 10 years ago, I think, or so, and now they're finally moving to their real building that was being reconstructed for many years. And the building is like an old Soviet theater, movie theater, which was called Celinny, from Celina, and it was like a project of the 1960s under Nikita Khrushchev, when they were forcing people to go to Kazakhstan, which is a steppe area, and develop agriculture there, because there was a way of kind of a belief that this is where we will grow corn and we will grow, grains and all that. It didn't work in the end, but it was very popular, and so that's why it was called after this movement, the Celine, and it was full of this modernizing kind of spirit. And then of course it went out of business, and now the building is given to this center, and they want to keep the title because it's connected with certain colonial socialist histories, but at the same time to change it. And so they were telling me, like, maybe we will remove one letter from the title, maybe we will do something else with the building, to kind of show that we are not so sure that we entirely accept this legacy, but at the same time we don't want to just erase it and, for example, destroy the building. And that, I think, is very complex. It's very entangled histories and relations with what happened, and maybe at this point this is the only thing we can do. And I would think that it would be interesting to see projects like that also in this part of the world, like how people can kind of work with it in a decolonial way, not by destroying, but by doing something decolonial, gestures or small things to this.
Given that we Nexu want to bring global South perspectives to the Nordics, how could we connect or reconnect anti-colonial intellectual endeavors with locally grounded histories?
First of all, locally grounded histories are also very diverse, and some of them are more mainstream and are trying to also fit into this mainstream Western sort of understanding, and there's a lot of that in this region. But there are also others, like, for example, if we speak of Sweden, of Norway, or Finland, there is a Sami story. There is indigenous Sami people here who are still struggling now with this kind of settler colonialist state, and losing everything, their lifestyle, their land and everything. So it's an ongoing struggle, and now it's more visible than before. And I think this is a local version and example of anti-colonial struggle, which is ongoing. And I think in many ways it does connect with what is happening in the Global South with indigenous groups. And it also gives something very unique and different, because it's a European indigenous people living in the north of Europe, right? And that is not very visible in Canada or in Australia or in the US in indigenous studies. And in that sense, they add something really unique. And I think that we need to maybe have more collaborations with them, so they are not also left alone in their struggle. And there is so much in common between the people who are more or less migrant scholars or newcomers from the global south with them. Because in the end, we all are in this kind of position of a global south representatives in the north that are trying to kind of, carve a space for ourselves and also make sense of what we do. So in that sense, I think there should be some collaborative links and connections with them. But also with local people. I mean, there are also some movements and some activist kind of organizations in Nordic countries. But the problem is that they are very detached from global south perspectives. They don't know the language of that. I mean, it's not something that is, it's known in academia maybe, but not among the activists. So that also needs to be more developed, I think, and it's one of the tasks that we have also as researchers. It's very hard because the university again functions on its own level somewhere, right? And so you don't just go there and meet with them. You have to have somehow to become connected. But when I do have a chance to meet with such people, I see that there's so much in common, so many things in common between us, but we all kind of exist in our own spaces, and that is a problem. And for me, again, for instance, it is a problem. I don't want to write about Sweden because I feel like I'm a foreigner here and always be, right? So I don't have the right, so to say, to kind of criticize Sweden or write about. I can write about how we feel as foreigners in Swedish academia, which I do, or the forms of intellectual discrimination or something that are there, of course, that I do. But to write about Sweden as an object of analysis, I can't. And that, yes, I agree, sometimes creates an issue, like you are kind of displaced to a certain kind of strange space, right? And then you keep writing about the South, or you keep writing about something else, and then how does it work? How do you keep your connection with that, right? And that, I think, is an issue for all of us. But I think we need to work more on creating these collaborative spaces with what we have here, and maybe make an effort to learn more first about these kind of organizations and movements, and then try to make an effort and connect with them.
I found this very interesting, two concepts in your work. There are complexity and impurity. Mm-hmm. How do we embrace and explore complexity and impurity in a useful manner?
Well, I don't know if we explore it or use it, but it's just there. The complexity is a fact of life, but the problem is that again, academic framing prevents us from realizing the complexity of the world, of the crisis, because it's disciplinary organized and areas organized, and each discipline studies from its perspective, very specific, very narrow, a set of issues, and it doesn't go elsewhere. And if you do interdisciplinary research, it's still difficult. It's not that easy because most of knowledge is organized within disciplines. And I think this is one of the major issues with knowledge production generally in modernity, and it continues to be so. So in order to even be fully aware of the complexity, you have to kind of abandon that frame that we are taught in the university and elsewhere, because in most cases we're not even able to realize that complexity. So I guess in that sense it has to go back to some more holistic knowledge, and that's very hard because knowledge is so specialized. So the more specialized it becomes, the less we understand about the world. And unfortunately, the current trends of artificial intelligence, data collection, come on, we can collect all sorts of data, but we know more about the world, but we understand less and less because we don't know how to interpret all that data. We can only store it. And that's I see as a problem. So, and that's why you need several disciplines, and you need people who cross disciplines in order to even start understanding anything. And impurity comes right there, right? So it cannot be about the purity of discipline, defending the borders of your disciplines or countries or whatever, identities. It's very messy. And I think that it was Maria Lugones, Argentinian philosopher and feminist, queer thinker, who wrote about it first. In one of her articles, actually, which is very old, and she wrote it before the colonial option came into view, where she talks about impurity. And she uses, as usual, the metaphors from the kitchen. She talks about her mother who was teaching her how to make mayonnaise. And when you make it, you can actually make a mistake, and then it doesn't work because you use oil and you use eggs and they don't mix very well, or if they do, then you don't have the right consistency, because mayonnaise is not a mixture, because in that mixture it's an emulsion or something, right? So she was using this metaphor to explain what she means by this. It's not that you completely assimilate and become something new, and it's not homogeneous, so it's always impure, it's always in different states and conditions, right? And so that's what she meant, and she always insisted on this impurity. But I think that it's a concept that is so much disliked by modernity, because it wants clear-cut divisions.
What aspects of non-Western or global South societies do you find most compelling, interesting, or enjoyable?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to be original here, because I think food is one of the things that works on the most basic level. So for me it would be that, but I wouldn't go there. I think it's more the sense of life, liveliness and presence of life that sometimes I lack. And also I'm into herbs. So even living in Russia, which is a very unpleasant and cold place, but somehow it still kept this. You can go to the apotheke and you can buy different medicinal herbs. So instead of taking chemicals, if you have a cold there, you can make this herb or that herb. And this is a knowledge that you know from childhood. And this is what I totally miss here. When whatever happens to you, you have to take paracetamol. It's depressing to me, because there are so many other options in the world, but they somehow disappeared.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been very nice. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you for the wonderful questions.
Yeah.